paperboard, the evening TV. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a face of somebody who needs you. Everywhere you look, when you're lost out there and you're all alone, a light is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look, everywhere you look.
Hi guys, welcome to StuMin. Tonight we're going to be going back to the Bible curriculum that we were doing before all of this happened. So we're going to be in the book of Mark, and giving our message tonight is Dawn Ridgway, talking about the parable of the wicked tenants. So I'm going to pass it on to her.
Hi, I'm Dawn. The starting point for my message is the parable of the tenants, and then I'll share a personal story that relates to how I see this parable as a guide for our lives. Jesus is in the temple with his followers at his feet. The high priests and Pharisees are standing to the side. Jesus speaks mainly to his followers, but makes sure that the temple leaders hear him as well. As I read the parable, there'll be some key phrases on the screen to help you remember the story. The parable of the tenants, Mark 12. Jesus then began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Then the landlord sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one the tenants killed. The man sent many others. Some of them they beat. Others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But the tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What, then, will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read this passage of Scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Then the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders looked for a way to arrest Jesus, because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. But they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away. Parables are not just stories told to pass the time. They're allegories used to link symbolic references to real life. Jesus was holding a mirror up to the temple leaders. These religious leaders functioned strictly out of tradition and rigid law. They had no true love for God. Therefore, they rejected Jesus when he came speaking of grace, love, and forgiveness. They wanted him silenced because his popularity threatened their power. This parable also provides a foreshadowing of how they will treat Jesus, God's Son. Jesus is loved by the people. He makes the authorities uneasy because Jesus has a message that goes beyond their strict traditional laws. The authorities put forth accusations and bullied the lesser temple leaders to go along with them. Listen to this verse from John 12. Yet at the same time, many, even among the leaders, believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith, for fear they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved human praise more than praise from God. The parable of the tenants shows a landlord who, like God, continuously gives people another chance. But there's the harsh reality of consequences. The tenants, or farmers, make a choice to defy the landlord, and things spiral downward from that point, with each servant who came to collect being abused to a greater degree, and then the son is beaten to death. Their cycle of bad deeds takes the tenants to a point of no return. The tenants don't receive the land as they think they will, but rather the parable hints that the land will be given to others. This storyline offers the high priests who are listening an open door, a chance to rethink the journey they are about to undertake in leading Jesus to death on the cross. But they don't change their course. The truth is, because we know what we know about God's plan for Jesus, in fact, the very reason he was sent to earth was to take on the burden of sin for all humankind, we can read this story and know there ain't no way those priests were going to change. What had to be done simply had to be done. What can this mean for us? Why do we sometimes see the writing on the wall and still do stupid stuff? My faith and my trust in God's goodness and grace leads me to believe that God offers us lessons. I don't see punishment in the hard times, but that sometimes we need more than a gentle story to wake us up to some tough truths. A parable about servants being beaten for just doing their job, a beloved son being beaten to death over greed, is a gruesome tale. My so what for you is the reminder to listen to one another's stories. Listen to the scary, tragic stuff on the news with an eye to what if and what would I do to still be okay? Or more importantly, what will I do or not do to avoid that becoming my story? How many of you have seen the movie The Princess Bride? It's a pretty old movie and happens to be part of my story. I saw The Princess Bride in the movie theater on a date with a boyfriend who I could not stay away from. We dated in high school. He quit college after freshman year and was living in the city where I went to college. I knew this guy wasn't on a good path. I knew he was into stuff that I didn't agree with, but I was drawn to him. I was drawn to taking care of him, drawn to his lost soul. After the movie, he told me that he needed me to drive him somewhere. Of course, I had a car and he didn't. We pulled up on a side road next to a fence in an area of town where I'd never been. He got out of the car and 2 minutes later, a police car came up behind me, lights blazing. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with a very wrong person. One of the cops came up to my car door and escorted me to the back of the police car for questioning. I tried to answer while I was crying my eyes out. I knew this wasn't me. Thankfully, the process of going to the police station, being fingerprinted, and appearing in court cured me of hanging out with this guy. And thankfully, the judge realized I didn't know what my boyfriend was up to that night, and my charges were dropped. Now, whenever I watch The Princess Bride, and I've watched it more than a few times, I enjoy the humor, memorable lines, and sweet romance. But I can't forget what happened that night that I first saw it. And that's a good thing. I had ignored the whisper in the back of my mind that was telling me to quit clinging to this guy. I had the false perception that his attention was real love, that I wasn't strong enough to be on my own, that I didn't have value if I wasn't in a so-called romantic relationship. I needed a shock to get me to act on what I already knew. As a parent, I try to push the message that my kids should pay attention to those subtle voices, to have a plan for when they get caught up in a situation, or to understand the signs of an unhealthy relationship. Sometimes we humans are thick-headed, so when you find yourself in a situation that has spiraled out of control or is heading south fast, stop. Find a way to reconnect with God. Allow Him to reveal how the experience will strengthen you. During those challenging times, without you realizing it, Jesus is showing you an open door, a chance to reevaluate the path you're heading down. Learn from others' stories. Do what you can to avoid the stupid stuff. But if you find yourself in a challenge, a not-so-good consequence, have faith and take heart the lesson that God has sent before you.
Well, hey everybody, and welcome to my kitchen, where we're going to celebrate communion today. So here I am at my dinner table, and maybe you're at yours. And if you're not, go ahead and go to your dinner table now. This will be way cooler if you do. You can pause it, don't forget. Well, anyway, so it may be weird that I'm at my dinner table celebrating communion, to say that somehow we're celebrating this thing together. But it's not so weird when you think about it, right? Because every time we gather in church to celebrate communion, we're sitting around an altar, which is the big dinner table in the sanctuary, right? And through the words that the pastor says and the mystery of God, when we celebrate communion there, around that altar, around that table, we are in some big, mysterious, transcendental way celebrating communion with all Christians everywhere, all around the world. And so actually, maybe this isn't that weird after all. Maybe we're more together than you might think. So, probably a lot of you haven't celebrated communion on your own at your house before. This is probably like the 5th time we've done it in my house, so it's new for me too. So don't worry about getting this right. But what I want you to do, if you haven't already, is go get bread or something like bread. This is whole wheat. We celebrate a very, very healthy Jesus in our house. Whole wheat bread. And then this is some Christian regale. We don't have any wine or juice for that matter, but we, for some reason, have this. Anyway, go ahead and grab some of that for you and for whoever else is around your table. And I'll wait here. Go ahead. You got your stuff? Fantastic. All right, so I'll go ahead and say the words, all right? So these are the words that the pastor says all the time from the front. And it's reminding us where this tradition comes from and the promises that are attached to it. So, in the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus was in an upper room with his friends. And he took some bread and he gave thanks. And he broke that bread. So if you've got your bread, go ahead and break it. It's kind of fun to do. He broke that bread and he gave it for everybody to eat, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body broken for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." There's your bread. And then again, after supper, he took some wine or cold duck or whatever it is you've got, and he gave thanks. And he gave it for all to drink, for everybody to drink, saying, "Take and drink. This cup is the new covenant. It's a new promise in my blood for the forgiveness of sins, for the freedom from sins. And give this to everybody to drink. Do this for the remembrance of me." And so now, here's what I want you guys to do. Hey, Emil, come over here. So this is Emil, my 7-year-old. And this is what I want you to do. So I want you to take your bread, and I want you to say this. "This is the body of Christ broken for you." Now, Emil, you can go ahead and eat that. Go ahead and mow that down, chew it up. Kind of hard to chew bread on the spot, isn't it? Yep. Yep. And then, I want you to go ahead and take whatever it is you're using for your wine and say this. "Emil, this is the blood of Christ shed for you." And you can go ahead and take a sip. But maybe for safety reasons, go ahead and get everyone their own, you know.
Yay!
Yeah. But that's basically it. And then what I also encourage you to do is to go ahead and have your kids say the same words to the next person and the next person and the next person until everyone has had their share in communion. And friends, that's how you do it. That's how, as a family, you're going to chug that all the way to the end. That's how, as a family, you can celebrate freedom from sin and the grace of God around your dinner table. And that's how we all celebrate it together. So, thanks for joining us for communion, and we'll see you next week.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. Oh.
Thanks so much, Don. That was awesome. I'm going to send you guys off to your small groups. Your leaders have some discussion questions that you can have some conversation about, but tell your leaders that you want to meet with them. You can meet over FaceTime or Google Hangout or Zoom. Plenty of ways to do that, but just be talking to your small group a little bit. Before we go, we put together a compilation video of all of those fun things that you sent us that you're doing in quarantine. It's just a little sneak peek, but the full video will be on our Instagram TV, which the link is right here. Go right there. And it's our StuMin, it's Pop StuMin on Instagram. So go check that out. And I'm just going to give you guys a blessing. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
This is that feel-good song you haven't heard yet, but you've been needing ever since you were in 3rd grade. Your mama's dancing along, 'cause mama knows best. Just close your eyes, don't look around, take a step and start grooving. We got one job, keep it moving. You don't need a reason to be hands up all around. Tell me what's been getting you down, it's best time you started. It's best time you started grooving. We gotta bring it back. So many hours watching Netflix, side chicks staring at your telephone. Nobody's dancing anymore. No, I don't mean bumping and grinding. I'm talking grooving. We got one job, keep it moving.